And now for our very first panel. It's called The Commercialization and Personalization of Space. In the last decade, the commercial space industry has grown a lot. Private companies are delivering cargo to the International Space Station, developing the capability to put people in low Earth orbit. NASA is shifting focus to deep space exploration, creating an opening for private enterprise. And I think it's fair to say that private enterprise is seizing the opportunity and investing big time. And we've got a great group of people here to talk about this. Please welcome to the stage the President and Chief Executive Officer of United Launch Alliance, Tory Bruno, the Director of Georgia Center of Innovation for Aerospace, Steve Justice, and the Mission Director of the Penn State Lunar Lion Program, Michael Paul. And here to lead us through the conversation throughout the morning is the incomparable Steve Colleagues, my colleague, Washington Editor-at-Large for The Atlantic. What did I call you?
Thank you very much. Guys, how are you? Okay, we're going to start this a little different. I have something called the Atlantic Cafe. Have a seat, guys. We'll get to you in a second. How many of you are engineers? Put your hands high up if you are an engineer. Okay, hold on just a second. Engineer. Okay. Tell me your name. Caitlin.
I'm Caitlin.
And what do you do?
I'm a second-year electrical engineering student at Georgia Tech.
Excellent. So it's Caitlin. Let me write that down. Hands back up. You're cool. Are you cool?
I think so.
Yeah? And are you? And tell us about you.
I'm Harleen. I'm a fourth-year aerospace engineering student at Georgia Tech. And
Is Georgia Tech the only game in town?
Yeah.
Okay, got it, yeah. Great. And so it's Harleen?
Yes.
Excellent. Anybody engineer and cool here who's not a Georgia Tech person? I'm going to come back to you later, Josh. Anyone else? No. Okay, who's cool, not an engineer, and interested in space? Oh, yes, you're cool. I can tell. Were you like on Dancing with the Stars or something? Yeah.
Kelly Girardi. I work for Mastin Space Systems.
Mastin Space System.
M-A-S-T-E-N.
And it's Kelly. Okay, so I'm going to do something I haven't done before. You three are automatically part of the next panel discussion because I have three guys back to back twice. And I agree with Ellen Stofan. Ellen's right here, and she says, when you have all guy teams, they just don't produce quite as well. So we've just fixed it, and I wanted to say how important it is. The other thing I learned, where's Eric Spiegel? So Eric, who is the president of Siemens USA, I got him to bring the Mars Lunar Curiosity to New York a couple of years ago. It was great, and we had one of the NASA operators there, you may recall, made it very clear to me that Curiosity was a female. So I just want to make sure that we fixed all that. So thank everybody for joining us. Tony, I've been reading your tweets. They're really out of this world. Yeah. So, let's just start with this broader. You have, just won a big contract on, as I understand it, a bulk sale of liftoffs and whatnot, taking payloads to space and whatnot. But you've also, have thought a lot about this broad question of what's out there. And you're famous as a tweeter for articulating that. And I just want to give you an opportunity because when I was thinking about talking to the three of you, and I'm sort of sad that we're not on a beach or on a lunar rover or somewhere that you are very creative people thinking about questions that most of us that are more terrestrial are not. And so I just want to get a sense of what you think mankind is up to in your world or out of this world.
Sure. Well, this is a very exciting time for us to be here, to be alive, and to be talking about this topic because we are on just the very threshold of an expanded and permanent human presence beyond our planet. And we are working with the people who are going to make that happen. So I can see 1,000 men and women living and working in space within 3 decades. And we're going to go out and we're going to make that possible.
How many?
1,000.
I'm going to just make your mic, just move it up a little bit so that you can say that loudly and boldly. Say that again.
1,000.
There you go. What will it take us to do that, Michael?
All of my students.
All of your students. Can you raise your mic up a little?
Oh, sure, yeah. No, it's really going to take, I think, all of us who are teaching and leading and forming companies and doing the work now to share what we're doing and why it's important in a way that is going to inspire the millennial generation, frankly. And for our part at Penn State, we've really done a good job of that. We've got hundreds of students who've gone through the program that I run there that believe that they're the space generation. I had a young man who spent 4 years in Iraq with the Marines come to Penn State to get his aerospace engineering degree because he wanted to figure out how the heck do those helicopters that I flew around in Afghanistan stay aloft. And but after he joined the Lunar Lion team, he came to me and he said, I know what they did in the Apollo days was important. You've taught us a lot about what NASA's done with robotic spacecraft in the 70s and the 80s and so forth. He said, but I believe that we're the space generation, that the millennials are the ones who are going to make this happen. And so to realize this vision of 1,000 people living in space in 30 years, I want to see that. It's going to take them to do this. I mean, we're leading the way, we're laying the groundwork, but it's really going to take them.
Tell us about, when we're thinking about the commercialization, but the personalization of space, and I've been through a whole set of tweets. Not that I'm not obsessed with Twitter, but you can sort of recognize and see things. Like in Tory's tweets, you see both an engagement with the public that I'm not used to people that lead companies or lead bureaucracies doing. The risks of that kind of conversation are so high. So kudos to you for that. This is going out. Can you hear me now?
You've been lassoed.
We can go to the moon, but we can't make the mics work.
When you talk and you're engaged with young people and putting together a team, I guess we got a mic that works?
There you go.
Hello? Hello?
There you go.
When you're putting together the young people and young team at the university and Penn, and you're looking at how to define that, I'm interested in whether, to the degree that you look at the pipeline of talent. I'm amazed by the group, the young people that are out here that I just talked to and met, the enthusiasm there. And I'm wondering, is that enthusiasm and curiosity for space thick in American engineering programs? Is it as robust as it ought to be? Are we setting a kind of anticipatory horizon for our young people thinking this should be a priority of the country? Because as I go around the country, I don't usually spend time at space commercialization programs, but I worry that there is a trend that those kinds of things are boutique, that they are extraneous to what this country should be about, and that has me worried. So how big a worry is that for you?
It's not a worry for me at all. There are a lot of CubeSat teams at colleges all over the country where they're building small satellites, and one of the concerns is that not enough of them are actually getting into space. But I think that that's going to change rapidly over the next 5 years, and
I will fix that for you faster than that.
faster than that. Thank you. That would be great. But I don't think that the frustrations of getting the hardware to launch has stifled that enthusiasm. In fact, this Pennsylvania Space Grant Consortium, they funded a high school team to build a CubeSat that ended up on the orbital launch that failed last October. And so these kids built a satellite, actually won a competition to be able to put this onto a launch, and it was on its way to the space station, and it failed. And that's awful, right? But when I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's disappointing and frustrating for them, but what an awesome lesson. Sometimes things don't work. And at that age, these kids are learning that. And then they got to build another one, and they put it on the SpaceX launch that failed over the summer. And so twice, these kids have lost something in space. And I've been a part of a mission that failed after launch, and it was hard, but we learned a lot from that.
Right.
And so these things that are going on now, I think, are just the pebbles on an avalanche.
Next time.
Yeah.
Come to
Yeah, Steve?
And we're also reaching out to the high schools. There's lots of different STEM activities, or STEAM, or whatever you want to call it. But we have a couple of companies, specifically SpaceWorks here in Atlanta, who does a summer camp for high school students. I had the pleasure of being there for their final presentation this summer when they did it. And these are really sharp high school kids who are very excited about space. And that translates into, I look at Georgia Tech and our School of Aerospace Engineering here in Georgia. We have almost 1,500 undergraduate and graduate students, and it keeps growing every year. So kids coming out of high school see a future in aerospace and in space. So they're seeing it. They're coming to the schools. They're getting that education. They're hoping there's jobs out there in the future. They maybe want to be one of the 1,000 that are going to be up there, actually. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of excitement about it. It's just how we capture that to move forward.
Now, Steve, you're director of the Center for Innovation for Aerospace, and I was looking at something you had written that saying that there are 4 trends in 2015 that you see happening, and I found them very interesting. One is, you said, commercial space innovation will expand, so good thing for today. Defense budgets will continue essentially to show the way and create opportunities, new opportunities. 3, that unmanned aircraft is becoming really the focus of innovation, and that commercial aviation will strengthen significantly, so on the commercial side. What I'm interested in is how you see the arena of partnerships and the government's role in this. I was very intrigued by the defense notion of this, and as you look at what many people consider to be the cutting edge of space, very few people are saying the government. And I'm wondering how you see that ratio, and then I'd love to ask Tory and Mike how they see that.
Well, what I said about defense and what I say now is that you've heard about declining defense budgets, declining spending, but there's still opportunity in defense. If you look at the aircraft side of the DoD, there's $39 billion in their budget this year. That's a lot of money that you can tap into if you're a commercial company. What we're trying to do in the state of Georgia is look at how do we take an already strong aerospace industry we have, and we're really strong in the aero part of space, as Bobby Braun always tells me over at Georgia Tech. How do we take that industry that's already very strong in defense, very strong in commercial aviation, and how do we take those skills in that workforce and apply them to grow our space sector, where we are fairly weak? And if you look at the Space Foundation report, $330 billion global market, 75% of that is commercial. So how do we take our companies, how do we work from a state perspective to help our companies grow? And in the state of Georgia, we do things working with companies like Generation Orbit. They're developing a horizontal launch system. So we've been working with them for almost 5 years on that, just helping to connect them with resources. They need some structural testing. We connect them with Mercer University down in Macon for that. They work with Georgia Tech. They needed to test a kick motor for their 3rd stage, and they couldn't do that here in downtown Atlanta. That would be a little bit of a problem with the noise. So we hooked them up with Middle Georgia State University, our aviation school, and they were able to do that testing down in Middle Georgia, a more remote area. So that partnership is how do we help them solve their problems? How do we help them with technology, workforce, business environment, so that they can grow their company and create more jobs in our state?
Tory?
Well, sure. Public-private partnerships have actually been an important part of the launch industry for many, many years. Our company's platforms were started with almost $5 billion of private investment from Lockheed and Martin, and as I'm developing my new rocket, we'll be bringing, I won't say how many, but more than $1 billion worth of private investment to do that. But this moment in time is different. As we move forward, you're going to see a much more important role of private investment in private companies. So the government investment in NASA has really blazed the trail, but this cislunar economy that we are about to see appear just off the surface of our planet and between here and the moon is really going to be characterized by just being driven by private companies. Companies like ours, Bigelow, Maston, Planetary Resources. These are the outfits that are going to bring the innovation and create a self-sustaining economy that will be the place where these 1,000 men and women live and work.
So
this will be
a
different.
lot of people watching online right now, and again, you have the greatest tweets out of this world. You write another interesting parallel when the Cislunar 1000 is a reality. Space will be just another place where people live and work. So can you, for the many of us who don't follow space every day, explain Cislunar to us?
Sure, that's literally the space between here and the moon. And we are living in a time when one of the most important discoveries in human history has just happened. The president of the university alluded to it. Georgia Tech had a huge part in it. We now know that water is everywhere. That's huge, not just because it sustains human life in space, but because we can make propellant from it. It will be the one thing that enables us to be a multiplanetary species. And so, when we talk about Cislunar, we now say, well, you know, about half the energy to get anywhere in the solar system is just getting to Leo. And once you're past that, there are resources in such abundance, literally between here and the moon, that it defies human imagination. Water in mass quantity, of course, rare earth materials, other metals, precious materials that are so rare here on Earth that we struggle and we strive over, are right there, just a week away from where you sit right now. And that's what we're talking about. We're going to change the paradigm of lift that makes it possible to access that, and then these other companies that share our vision are going to lead the innovation that makes that possible.
Let me ask all three of you, do you think we're putting enough resources into this world you see? And if not, what would be a game changer in terms of the kinds of resources or the types of things that would, help essentially drive that vision a bit faster? Michael?
Are we putting enough resources in? Yeah. I wish that NASA's budget were not just one tiny part of a dollar on every tax dollar paid to the government. I think it should be 3 or 4 times what it is.
You tweeted out that Elon Musk was calling, I think one of you did, Elon Musk was calling for a much larger NASA budget.
I'm with him on that one for sure. Everybody, we should all write to our Congress people and tell them to give more money to NASA. But at the same time, we're seeing this growth right now of business and commerce and value to investors and companies by activity in space. And I think that part of the answer is that the balance needs to shift from all of us always relying on NASA for all of our stuff to something that allows companies to see the value in investing in space. And for our part, we're a university. I'm not so worried about return on investment from a dollars to dollars perspective, but the work that we're doing with our students has encouraged Siemens, who's given us the software that we need to do our work. And we didn't have
This is the PLM.
The PLM software. They sent a trainer to our campus last winter to teach 16 of our students, how to use NX and draw, and we're bringing somebody back to learn how to do the analysis for thermal, for mechanical stress, and so forth. So they're investing in our future by teaching our students how to use their tools and do this work. And we've gotten gifts from Lockheed Martin and from Boeing, the partners in ULA. And so they see the value in supporting our project. And we couldn't do it without them. We couldn't do it without the 1,000 individual donors that we have to the project.
Steve?
Yeah.
I think really to understand that we're moving into different phases. We've been in the exploration phase for the last 50 years. We're now moving into the exploitation phase, and maybe at some point into the colonization phase. Yeah. If you go back to even the founding of this country and your history, you kind of understand that. It'll come down to economic development. We're going to put 1,000 people in space. How many thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs will that be to support that infrastructure out in space? How will that affect the day-to-day lives of people in my state, Georgia? How many jobs will that be? How many jobs can I say to the governor? It's this much economic impact. It's affecting our lives. That, when they see the economic impact of it, when I go around the state and talk about aerospace in general, and it's, hey, folks, it's $51 billion a year to the state of Georgia. People, their eyes open, they go, oh, so it's important. Yes. And if we tell that same story in space, hey, it's $330 billion and growing, and it's jobs in your community, then you see even more support beyond just, hey, we think it's cool.
Tory, when you look in your arena, I'm going to move to questions and our other panelists in the audience in a moment. How much of this is, we're talking about sort of U.S. partnerships in a way, but there's also a very big global dimension. India in Mars, China, Russia, many other players are engaged in space. And of course, there's a side to this which isn't the earnest kind of feel-good side. There's also a concern that space may be, the next zone for defense, for competition, sort of space wars, if you will. So how much of it is, the earnest, this will make mankind better, and how much of it is, global concerns that if they're not there, that there's some sort of vulnerability?
Well, you can never really have one without the other. And this is an especially acute issue for the United States because we leverage space and are reliant upon space in a way that other nations are not for our national security. But having said that, it's a big place. And there is room for commercialization and economic development for everyone. And when those resources are tapped into, it will change everything here on Earth. Much of the conflict we experience is over a shortage of resources. And as I said a moment ago, right there, just above your heads, are resources in such abundance that it defies your imagination. That will change the dynamic between nations.
Let me quickly go to Caitlin. Do we have a microphone in the audience? Okay, good. Caitlin's right in the front row. If I had it right, yes. So I'd like to hear what you think about these guys on stage and what they didn't say that you find important in thinking about space.
Oh, put me on the spot. Okay. You talk a little bit about attracting students to aerospace and things like that. I think something that's contributed to that is, honestly, some of like the pop culture that's surrounding this right now. The Martian just came out, right? How many bad reviews have you heard about that movie? So I do think that's kind of attracting some attention. It's not the only one.
How many have seen The Martian? I have not yet. I just want to. How many thought it was great? Okay, cool. Okay, so I haven't seen the bad reviews. I know I've got Ellen's. This is Ellen up here. We're going to talk about The Martian later. But did you think it was a good movie?
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Okay.
And it's not alone. There was Interstellar. There's Gravity. It's one of several ways that I think general society is getting exposed to space more. I think that's helping the interest a little bit.
That's interesting. I mean, that is the broader question about whether fiction helps us dream, whether novels, movies, sort of the new Jules Verne and whatnot, the Ray Bradburys have helped capture this for Americans and give them a sense of priority. If you didn't have that, if we were all boring pencil pushers and didn't have that, would we be doing as well?
No, and it's not just the fictional storytellers that are important. I mean, the fact that if you I read The Economist, and almost every single week they have a story about something in space in there. And it's been going on for like 5 years. The Economist, really? Every single week there's something about space in The Economist for years now. And The Atlantic is doing this. I mean, You guys are important storytellers in our culture. And the fact that you're doing this, the fact that these movies are so popular, I think is a part of building up the momentum that we need in order to realize these dreams that we have.
And let me quickly, is it Kelly? Tell me your name again. Harleen, yes. Harleen right here. What do you think when we talk about the commercialization of space and this subject? We're sitting across from your university at Georgia Tech. So one of the dimensions is how to make the partnership between what the private sector is doing, maybe what the government backbone can provide, what university can bring to it. Is there, as you get into this arena, is there something you feel ought to be part of that mix that would make that synergy better than it is?
So I'm actually doing a project, a Boeing-sponsored senior design project, and I think that sort of collaboration between the school and like an actual senior design project with a company and like with a corporate, a giant in the aerospace industry is really helpful because we get to connect with engineers at Boeing and, have them help us actually build a UAV and have a hands-on experience more than we would get if it was just a regular, senior design project. And I think like expanding those things into other fields like electrical engineering even, and like getting people that are interested in space but, chose to do electrical engineering, like, we need electrical engineers in aerospace, so I think kind of connecting that and having interdisciplinary things would be really useful, at least at Georgia Tech.
Let me just ask the three of you, and we're going to leave, well, I'm going to ask Michael to do something else, but the two of you about what you think in this partnership between different players in the commercialized sector, what universities might do to up their hand, and let me ask you what could do in the private sector, what you would like to see more in the private sector. But Tory?
Sure. Well, universities can play in a couple of different ways. But before I answer that, I have to say, Caitlin, I'm so relieved to have your movie review. I'm taking my entire company to see that movie.
Really?
Thank God.
Yeah, good.
I love the book. But, of course, there's the traditional role that universities have always played in terms of research and then, of course, providing these wonderfully talented and enthusiastic young people to enter the workforce. But now there's a new thing that we see many universities doing, which is to sort of facilitate innovation in startup companies and companies that are sort of almost bridging between academia and private industry. In fact, we see that to a great extent in CubeSats now. There are purely research-based things with students, and then there are companies that are actually using students to do work as part of a company that's out there trying to make money and do a mission as well.
Steve?
I think it's critical to understand that universities are traditionally technology push organizations. They generate new ideas, new technologies, they push it out, they mature it, they get it into incubators, and they shove it out into industry. The other side of this is what we're doing in Georgia is the technology pull side of it. That's my organization, where we're industry facing. We go out there and we're talking to the companies. What are your problems? What are you looking for? How can we connect you with what's going on in the universities, with these students, all those things? So we have to understand we need both sides of that equation, technology push out, technology pull, pulling those resources out of the universities and other resource organizations in the public realm.
And you're involved in this new spaceport idea, right?
We are supporting that from the state perspective at the Camden Spaceport. It's a local project, and they're going through the environmental impact statement part of that now. Georgia Tech has been supporting that with their technical expertise, so that we're very excited about that. That's a new addition to what we're doing here in the state, but we want a balanced space.
Can the U.S. have too many spaceports?
Well, that's like saying, can you have too many airports? We had very few airports before World War II. Now we have a lot. We have hundreds of airports even in the state of Georgia. So I think it's part of that commercial competition. It's good.
Michael, your thought about what the corporate sector can do better?
Sure. For years, NASA has had a really robust program of internships and supporting graduate students, and then funneling them into their workforce. And I know that companies, both big and small, old and new in the country in space, do bring in interns, and they do support their people to get graduate degrees and whatnot. If they could augment that in a way that I know it's hard to get an intern and stick them on a project and feel like you're getting value out of them.
I don't think so.
Oh, great, good. It can be, but if there's more of that, then not only will the companies be able to help grow that workforce, but they'll begin to build stronger and stronger ties back to the alma mater, back to the university that the students came from, and I think that'll feed on itself.
Great. Let me take at least one or two quick questions from the audience, comments. Yeah, right here, the gentleman with the cool tie. Should all take our ties off by the end of this conference, but it's still a cool tie. Yes?
Hi there. My name is Justin Kaiser, and I'm a graduate student at Georgia Tech, like maybe half the audience.
So I'm going to make one statement, which we're all going to have to bear with each other today. The great side of these grand halls is that they're grand. The thing that sucks about them is the acoustics. So what I'm going to ask is people to speak slowly and as much into the mic as you can, because while you can hear yourself, it's hard transporting, and I'm sure it's the same to others, and we will all work harder to make sure that we can all hear each other with this. We need to have a rug on the ceiling. It would fix it. But go ahead.
Absolutely. So my question to the panel is kind of talking about the commercialization of space and the ushering in of this new age. What do you personally believe that the workload sharing between robotic exploration and human exploration should be in this
Great
new
question.
age?
The balance between robotic exploration and human exploration. Ellen, I'm going to ask that question of you later, too, so get ready. Yeah, go ahead.
Real short, robots should always go first, and people should go when the robots can't do the work. That's what I believe. And there are lots of things that robots can't do. So we're going to need to keep sending people into space.
You had a... quick jump.
I don't think it's neither or. I think it's blended. It's going to become more and more blended. Some of the concepts have been when you go to Mars is to put the astronauts in orbit, and from orbit you can remotely operate at many, many different sites in one day rather than just the one you land at. So if you go to Mars, you could be in orbit for a while, work at 10, 15 different sites, and then the one that's the most interesting, maybe you find some microbe or something, that's the one you go and land at. So it's just another tool. It's not an either or.
Tory?
Shifting. So everything has been robotic until now, with a few notable and very exciting exceptions. But as we go forward in time, what my colleague said is true, but you will see a higher and higher percentage of people being involved in much more complex tasks. And as I said, eventually space is just going to be another place that you live and work.
Cool tweet. One other question. Yes, this lady right in the front. Green. It may be blue. I'm colorblind. I'm not sure. Green?
Green.
Okay, good.
My name is Lisa Murphy, and a few years ago I used to work at Marshall Space Flight Center with great debate over who should regulate space.
Who should
regulate space, right? So you mentioned lots of airports. Also, what happened in aviation is the FAA, right? So what do we need as a society to believe that we're going to have a safe and productive space flight?
Great question. Tory, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Well, it's no different than the law of the sea. So we need an international body that will regulate space to make it safe and to provide commerce for everyone.
Steve?
Well, I think for aviation, there's two models, the maritime model and the aviation model. We have ICAO in the aviation world, the international body. So you may see a blend of that where it's not purely like the maritime law. It may pull in the aviation component. So a little bit of blending there.
Any thoughts, Michael?
From my perspective, I see a continuum from the ground up to space. And I think that somebody like the FAA is going to need to control all of the launches that are going to happen in the next several decades in a way that doesn't interrupt air flight the way that it does today. And I'm not a regulator. I don't ever want to be the regulator, but I think it's going to take some investment by the part of our government and other governments to make sure that that's done right. And if they don't pay for it now, it's going to be, if the governments don't pay to regulate it well now, it's going to be a mess cleaning it up later.
Let me just ask you, just as we close this panel, what you think when you think 10 years ahead or 15 years ahead, which seems to be what all of you are doing if you're thinking about space there. What does this all look like then? I mean, is it Tory's world? Have we achieved that goal of actually being out there, living out there, sort of, peeling out of Earth a bit? And how does that transform society? If you can just give me 30 seconds each on that big question. Michael?
When I was a kid, we didn't know if there were other planets around other stars. And one little spacecraft from NASA has shown us thousands, right? So it's hard to say what 10 years is going to bring, but I think that the growth of competition in the industry and the innovation that's spurring and the reduction in launch cost is going to lead to really important changes.
Steve?
I think we're going to see public-private space stations, maybe even private space stations. We're going to see a lot more of economic development in space, not just on the ground, but in orbit, in cis-lunar space. And people are going to start seeing those benefits, those jobs, because in the end, we may have 1,000 people in orbit, but people say, what is it doing for me here on the Earth? Because the other 7 billion people want to know that. So it's going to be about economic development, and space is going to become a place you go to make money, and that's going to grow it even more.
And give us the final word, Tory.
Well, that's right on. In between, NASA going to Mars on the SLS, which is an amazing program and going to be a terrific human accomplishment, and these colonies that we envision has to be an economic sphere that's happening. People will go to space and live there when they can earn a living there and have a better life there, just like when my grandparents came from Europe to this country to have a better life. That's our future.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Michael Paul of the Pennsylvania State University Penn State Lunar Lion Program. It's so cool to read about. Steve Justice here, Director of the Georgia Center for Innovation in Aerospace, and Tony Bruno, CEO of United Launch Alliance. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.